Information shared on the following program is for general information purposes only. It does not constitute legal, tax, investment, or other advice, nor is it intended to recommend any particular investments, products, or financial instruments. Always seek advice from your financial advisor, attorney, or accountant with regard to investment, legal, or tax questions.
Welcome to the only show in the country dedicated to helping savers worry less about money, the WorryFree Retirement, with your host, retirement specialist and six-time author and fiduciary, Tony Walker.
For the past few weeks, and concluding with this week's show, we have covered what I referred to as the 4 pillars to a perfect retirement plan. And today, we find ourselves on pillar number 4, facilitate. So before we dive into how we at Tony Walker Financial can facilitate a worry-free retirement for literally thousands of savers, let's first define what facilitate means. According to Webster's, the description I like best is as follows: to make something easier, to help something run easier and effectively. In our world, we might use an example of facilitating by helping savers pay less in taxes on their 401k by facilitating the strategic withdrawals from it. Another example of our work in the process of facilitation would be the transfer or rollover of funds from a 401k or other brokerage company to the companies we use at Tony Walker Financial. As you're about to learn, there are many other examples of how a retirement planning firm such as ours can facilitate many other facets of a saver's life when they are faced with the many changes that will come their way in retirement. So what are the things you might need help with in facilitating your money, and how best to create that perfect retirement plan for you? Well, I'm glad you asked. Well, welcome folks to the Worry-Free Retirement, and yes, I am that little man in the sweater vest, facilitating specialist and full-time fiduciary, Tony Walker. And before we share with you the many ways we facilitate the transition from work to retirement, let me introduce 2 young lads who are always ready to facilitate the workings of this show each week: America's favorite financial sidekick, Mr. Aaron Orender, along with Louisville, Kentucky's most laid-back graphics artist, Mr. Derek Hudson. Okay, let's say you just happen to be one of the many savers out there who either 1, being offered a buyout from your current company, or 2, recently accepted a buyout. How about this? You're that person who is looking to retire in the very near future, or maybe you're that person who has been retired for years and worried that those golden years, as they call it, are turning out not to be so golden after all. Who in the world are you likely to hand over your life savings in hopes that they can create a retirement plan that includes the 4 pillars we have discussed, as well as be there for the long haul to assist you with all of the changes that are going to come your way in retirement? Besides the 3 pillars to a perfect retirement plan already discussed on this show, the 4th and final pillar, facilitate, to me, is the most important role an advisor can play in your retirement. Which is why, when I return, we're going to have some special guests in the studio to help share how Tony Walker Financial is so effective in facilitating the plans of all of the clients we serve into that worry-free retirement. So stay tuned. I am Tony Walker, and we will be right back.
Now it's time for the adventures of Stella and Ellis. You've been watching the adventures of Stella and Ellis.
Who can you trust? It's one of the most important decisions you'll have to make. Question is, are you ready? Well, we're here to help at Tony Walker Financial. You know, we care more about you than we do your money, and we have over 3,500 happy clients and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau to prove it. Rolling over a 401k, confused about Social Security, maybe you're afraid of running out of money. Learn how to use and enjoy and protect your hard-earned money. Log on now to TonyWalkerFinancial.com and let's get started. Welcome back to the Worry-Free Retirement, and today's topic is rounding out the 4 pillars to a perfect retirement plan with pillar number 4, facilitate, which is something we are really good at here at Tony Walker Financial. So before I bring on our special guests, let's begin with all of the items we might be called upon to facilitate the changes that will come our clients' way, and here's just a short list of them. First, change in employment, which could result from a layoff, a buyout, or any other retirement issue that might come along. The next is change in health, which could be a change in health resulting in you needing to retire or being already in retirement, and a change in health which has to deal with a lot of financial issues that come along with that. The third change is a change in housing. We see this all of the time with people retired and needing to downsize or move to follow grandkids around, and it's a huge adjustment and one that requires our facilitation. Fourth, change in spouse, which could either be through a divorce, a spouse passing away, or someone who is single and decides to remarry. Next up, change in expenses. That's right, folks. When you get into retirement, the expenses can change drastically, and you're going to need a retirement planning specialist who can help facilitate how to get you money to meet those changes. Next up, change in family members. And boy, this happens a lot. An example would be someone who's retired and maybe has to take over a grandchild's care. And of course, this could be a huge change in their lifestyle as a result. Up next, change in insurance, whether it's needing a Medicare supplement or needing health insurance prior to that time when a Medicare supplement might check in. Here's a good one, change in lifestyle. In fact, one of the biggest things we have a good laugh over that. In fact, Gina Tutwiler had this little sign made up we put on our desk that says this: "Behind every retired man is a woman wishing he would go back to work." What we mean by that is when someone decides to retire, the things they might do, whether it's hobbies or trying to stay busy, is a huge issue and sometimes something people haven't thought about. And finally, as evidenced by this recent article, stating that Social Security will no longer be sending paper checks to its recipients. But that's right, folks, because of changes in technology, lots of different things going on for our saver clients. Which is why today we're going to go back and tackle change number 1 and how we at Tony Walker Financial facilitate the movement of money from various 401k plans or other sources of savings or brokerage accounts from existing custodians over to the custodians of money that we represent at Tony Walker Financial. So here in the studio to help us talk about the facilitation of new business written by Tony Walker Financial, I have to my left Juanita Jackson, who is in charge of our new business with Schwab, and of course Mr. Craig Davis, who is actually in charge of a lot of the rollovers of the 401k plans from existing custodians over to Tony Walker Financial. And through the magic of Zoom in our Bowling Green office, the person in charge of our annuity new business, Miss JJ Jennifer Jaggers. Good morning, JJ and Juanita and Craig. So the reason I've got you all on today is, again, we want to focus on this transition and the facilitation required when somebody comes to us and they give us the go-ahead and say, I want to do business with you all. How do we get this money from my current custodian over to us? And a lot of times we get Trey involved and he kind of reviews the plan, but immediately let's assume it's going to go to Schwab first. Before we do anything, let's take a 401k, for instance, because we got a lot of people with buyouts out there. So Craig, you get involved and let's talk about the new business process, the first step we have to do in terms of the rollover. And if Juanita, if you want to jump in too in terms of the order of things, feel free to.
Yeah, that first call for me, I reach out, just check their schedule when they have availability for a 15-minute conference call. Sometimes we can just get it all accomplished in the first call. Sometimes we find out paperwork's necessary, sometimes multiple pieces of paperwork, and so it can get a little bit more cumbersome, and we schedule out how we need to approach all those things.
And then sometimes companies don't even need to know where need an account number, but a lot of times we call these companies, we just can't tell them to send a check payable to Schwab or whatever. What happens in those instances, Juanita, and when we know somebody's moving over, let's stay with the 401k because that's a little easier to dissect right now. Where do you come in and when?
So the first thing that happens when that new business comes over, we're evaluating the types of accounts, the custodians they're working with, and assigning the tasks so that we can pick up and call. Usually we know in advance which custodians are going to require an account number and which ones aren't. Of course, we're also dealing with complex transactions with transfers as well. We're looking at everything and listening. And then Craig will usually step in and reach out to the client to kind of explain to them what's going to happen, see when they're available, whether or not we need an account number, and what the timeline's going to be.
Okay, now JJ, and we're going to go into a deep dive on this, folks, so hang tight. But so JJ, in its simplest form, Craig's done the rollover call. Juanita's got the Schwab account set up. The check comes in. Where do you come in with the annuities in that example? We might have that lovely split IRA that we talk about, but where do you come in terms of the timing of moving that money over to our annuities?
So anytime the money is going to Charles Schwab first, I have to wait for that rollover that you discussed earlier to arrive there. And then Juanita, Craig will give me the okay to sweep those funds out of the Charles Schwab account for the annuity. Annuities are still a little bit old school in their method of transferring the funds. So it does go by a regular check. So there is a little bit of lag time with the mail. We can expect about a 2-week time for transfer for it to get from the Schwab account to that said annuity.
We talked earlier, Juanita, about the changes in technology. It is kind of weird because we work with Schwab so much, and we hate to dog annuity companies, insurance companies. I've worked with them for years. I love insurance companies. But yeah, speak to the technology change, just what Jennifer brought up in terms of how quickly we get money to Schwab versus the antiquated way sometimes we have to get money to the insurance companies for the annuities.
Well, the truth is, it is custodians with rollovers also are sending checks. However, we can do full ACAT transfers coming electronically through some custodians, and so those are very quick. Honestly, it's a bit of a mixed bag with who's sending a check and who's sending electronic transfers, but it can certainly delay the process. And in the worst case scenario, if a check just cannot be tracked or is missing at times, we're working hard to determine where that is and to get it quickly deposited. So a lot of things can happen. Technology is increasing daily. I would be surprised long term if they continue this mailing the paper check and we don't go to more seeing those ACH transfers.
Yeah, there'll be people walk in the office. They'll either, especially in the Louisville office, we have them in Bowling Green too, but in the Louisville office, we do a lot of rollovers. So all of a sudden, people will walk in and go, hey, I got this check. And they kind of have a feeling of like anxiousness, don't they? I mean, that check could be $600,000, $800,000, and it's been left on their doorstep and they rush over here with it. Speak to that, Craig. I know I was in a meeting the other day and a gentleman drove 60 miles to bring that check over. So why did he get a paper check on that rollover, and why did he have to bring it to us?
Typically, the government needs to know where those funds are, right? On a rollover, we'll hear that they are going to get a 1099. It's not a taxable event, but it's reportable. And so the government's tracking where the funds are and what kind of funds these are. So the paper check also comes with a check stub that will list out. These are pre-tax funds, these are Roth funds, these are after-tax funds. So the check stub still in a lot of these cases does seem to be really important. But certainly they come in with a rollover check. We can bring it up for the Schwab department. We just deposit it electronically. Within hours, it's in the account. Within a matter of days, it's available. And so it's a pretty quick process once the check arrives here.
And JJ, we don't have that capability though with insurance companies, do we? Yeah, so we get a check, because sometimes checks do come to the insurance companies. Again, there is no electronic way to get that to the insurance companies, correct?
No, unfortunately not. The process, it could mirror the Charles Schwab process a little bit when it comes to a rollover. Craig is still involved. He would request that check either be sent to the custodian, the new insurance carrier, or the client. And a lot of times that, he can speak to that better, but a lot of times that is preferred by their current custodian. So they will only allow it to go certain ways, I think, sometimes. So we will still get a check in office that's going directly to annuity, or sometimes they'll mail it directly to the annuity company, but it does have to physically be mailed to them. So if we receive it in office, we would send it in on the client's behalf. And then every once in a while, I think Craig can, depending on the custodian, can get that sent directly to the new insurance carrier, but it does have to physically go.
And I think what we're trying to say here, folks, is there's a lot involved when you decide to move money over. And not that we don't take responsibility. We do the best we can, but there are a lot of things out of our control when we're trying to get this money transferred over. You touched on something earlier, the ACAT transfer. Now, that's process is pretty easy. Where would an ACAT transfer come into play, Juanita, and how quickly we can move that money over? Can you describe that situation?
Those are usually coming from IRAs, from custodians, depending on what the holdings are in the account. We're immediately assessing those holdings, determining if they can transfer and whether or not the client wants to transfer those in kind or we can liquidate. At that point, once we submit that transfer, it can happen within the week and those funds are available very quickly into the account. So transfers from IRAs are a little bit different and also depending on what type of holdings are in the accounts. We're listening to the client, we're ensuring that we're bringing it over the way they want to, and we can get them over fairly quickly, I would say, within a week's time on the ACAT.
And in our time remaining, again, we're not trying to dog our competitors at all, but I've often said that it's a whole lot easier for insurance companies, brokerage firms, big wirehouses to accept your money, and it seems to be hard sometimes to get it back from them. We run into that a lot. JJ, speak to the time length involved, especially with annuities. I know we're working with a gentleman now, and he's tried to be very patient, and without going into too much detail, but what is the problem sometimes when we're trying to get this money moved from people's existing custodians over to us?
The most common problem I've probably run into, of course, we have to physically send a transfer request. They have to accept that transfer request. A lot of times the funds have to be liquidated before they'll release them, which requires a conference call with typically Craig and the client to liquidate those funds. Then they require us to send a new transfer request now that the funds are liquidated. So it can be somewhat of a 2-3 step process depending upon what their requirements are to let those funds go.
And even the gentleman, and I understood his frustration. He was like, I just didn't realize it would take that long. Now, we've tried to deal with this. If you would, Aaron, put this up full screen. This is called our onboarding process sheet. And as best we've done, we've kind of got a timeline of things. So in general, Juanita, back to the split IRA. Now, we're talking about moving over, transferring money, because we have multiple transfers. Sometimes we'll have a rollover, a transfer. We might have 4 or 5 accounts moving over. What would be a good rule of thumb to tell somebody from start to finish how long this process is going to take?
It really is a case by case. However, you can expect if there are annuities involved, I would say we're 30 days getting everything wrapped up for sure. Certainly if we encounter any issues or problems, it can take a little longer. You're going to see some funds, of course, they're usually initiated to Schwab. We're getting them there first, and then they're going out to annuity. But I would say if they want to see the entire thing wrapped up, and Jennifer could speak a little more clearly on this, I would say 30 days is a closer timeline.
Jennifer?
Yeah, I would say with the annuity, by the time the annuity is approved, the transfer of funds is requested. I would say probably 30 days is a good estimate on issue. If you include our delivery process, I would say a client can probably expect about a 6-week process for everything to be complete and everything to be reviewed again and everything being said and done.
Well, folks, we're about out of time. I'm going to have to wind it down. Thank you so much for all you do for the new business department at Tony Walker Financial, and appreciate all your work. Folks, we'll be right back.
Tired of the roller coaster ride of the stock market? Let Tony Walker show you how to smooth out the ride with your money. Log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com and let's get started.
Our client spotlight today shines brightly on Simeon and Debbie Ambergy. We always like to start off. Tell us a little bit about what you did for a living. We'll start with you, Debbie.
I've always worked like in clerical or secretary and, that type of work, and currently still do some of that. So
It's kind of working part-time.
yes.
And Simeon? For the past 20 years, I was working with Larno Harris.
And he is a 5-time Grammy Award, 11 Dove Award winning gospel artist, just probably one of the best Christian vocalists around. That transitioned me to seeking more production work. And especially like I started doing a lot of YouTube, and it really helped me to get into the technical aspects of music production and things.
What in the world prompted you to contact Tony Walker Financial? Debbie, do you remember much about that first contact?
We were just praying about what to do with our, our finances. And I just kept catching your program on the air, and I was just so impressed about how you use scripture. And I kept telling Simeon about it. That was the first encounter, yeah.
So I started watching too, and it was like, yeah, we need to do that.
And since that time, you've been with us several years now. How would you, Simeon, how would you explain the experience here, and particularly working with the staff and the details that go into your plan?
Well, and Debbie will agree with me. It's just there's peace. There's peace and confidence. So you walk in the door and you just instantly feel a sense of this is where we're supposed to be.
Well, we appreciate you all so much and appreciate your business.
Thanks for having us, Tony.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Looking for an advisor you can trust? Schedule your free phone call with Tony at TonyWalkerFinancial.com or call 1-877-499-9255.
Have you recently retired, been laid off, or offered a buyout? Has the company you work for moved, been acquired, or closed its doors forever? And finally, do you have a 401k with a previous employer you'd like to move to safer territory? Then take advantage of this opportunity to move your 401k or lump sum pension to Tony Walker Financial. Let's meet in person to discuss your retirement options. Log on now to TonyWalkerFinancial.com to schedule your free, no obligation appointment. Let us help you today. Our Live Well, Die Broke moment comes to us from Nancy Ritter, who in the past was featured on this show when she proudly displayed on the mantle of her home one of our coveted Tony Walker bobbleheads. But now, Nancy has outdone herself as she just sent in this pic to us of her and her grandkids on vacation, and look what the grandkids decided to bring along. That's right, folks, a hard copy of my children's book, The Adventures of Tony, Baloney, and Cookie. So Nancy, thank you for taking along Tony, Baloney, and Cookie to your vacation. And oh, by the way, if you'd like to find out more about the origins of Tony, Baloney, and Cookie, it is for real, folks, by the way. In fact, we created a website which you can view at TonyBaloney.com and actually see a pic of me and my dog Cookie back in the 60s, and you can actually watch a cartoon we created as well as order the book. And yes, while this book has nothing to do with money, it has a lot to do with having some fun with those young kids and grandkids. So I hope you enjoy it. Okay, on to the Bible segment. You know, as I thought about today's show and how our work to facilitate the many needs of our savers in retirement has become, I realized that what sets us apart from the rest of the financial herd in trying to do the same thing we're doing is this. It's our proprietary written game plan software that basically we created. Nothing like this in the industry, folks. And essentially, what is the purpose of this software? It is to shed light on how best our saver clients can use and enjoy their money at the least amount of cost and the least amount of taxes without the fear of one day running out. It is this ability of our work and this software to shine this light and allow them to see for the first time in many cases how and when they're going to deploy their life savings to create this income they can never outlive. Something we call
mailbox money.
Funny, when we speak of lighting the way to see things better, the Bible is full of light, and why it is only the light that it can expose what is in the dark. And no more is this subject shining a light to expose truth by blotting out darkness more evident than when Jesus reminds us that in Matthew 6:22, the importance of God's light, where he says, the eye is the lamp of the body, and if your eyes are good, your whole body will be full of light. So what's so special about light? Well, let's face it, without light, you can't see. And more importantly, without light, you can't see the whole thing. In other words, without light, yep, you and I are in the dark. You know, it's interesting that several years ago, my wife Susan, son Philip, and his wife Leanne took a trip to New York where, among many sites we visited, was hiking up to the top of the Empire State Building for this really cool view and this cool pic of the night-light skies of New York City. A breathtaking sight indeed. However, the next day, once the darkness was gone and the light of day hit the streets of New York, this is what it looked like. See what I mean about the power of the light exposing the truth of what is real? And folks, that is what the light of God can do. It can shine forth and expose not only the good things, but the bad. According to our good friend Charles Spurgeon, who in his August 3rd morning devotional focuses on this verse, Revelation 21:23, he reminds us believers that the Lamb, that's Jesus Christ, is the light, and His light is here to serve us in four very important ways. First, to expose us to God's joy. Second, the light shares with us His beauty. Third, the light provides us knowledge. And fourth, His light allows us to manifest truth by shining a light on it. Now, to me, personally, this fourth attribute of God's life, manifestation, is the most important in keeping my faith in check, because when I read the Word of God, His truth is exposed by His light. In other words, as I read the light which illuminates from the pages of Scripture, God manifests Himself to me, and the darkness I might be feeling is exposed and, goes away. You know, as I read His Word, it expresses who God is and why I need Him so much in my life. You see, the light of God as shown forth in 1 John 3:2 reminds us that we do not know what we shall one day appear to be, because in this life there is only partial light to expose us of who we are and how God sees us. Paul talks about this same thing, where in 1 Corinthians 13:12, he refers to this manifestation of who God is and who we're akin to looking like, as if we're trying to look at God through a foggy mirror. In other words, we see a glimpse of God and we see us for partially who we are, but not clearly who we are. But then one day we will know God as fully He has always known us. Moral to the story, it is difficult to see the glory of God when you and I are living in darkness. In fact, Jesus goes on to say in Matthew 6:23 that darkness is not just dark, it is a great darkness. It's a darkness that only the light can expel. And maybe that's you right now. Regardless of how much you love the Lord, for whatever reason, you're in a dark place and feel you cannot get out. Well, don't be fooled by the artificial lights of the world, but instead my suggestion is to turn to the light of God as found in His Word, a light that exposes the darkness so that you and I can see true joy in God. Read it and ask God to shine His light into your dark places of your life, and I assure you that the worries of this world will begin to grow strangely dim. And that, my friends, some good news you and I can take to the bank. Amen? Well, speaking of shining a light on the darkness, I've got some good news for you savers out there who feel like you're in the dark when it comes to your money and how best to use and enjoy and protect it before it's too late. We call it the free 10-minute fiduciary phone call, and it's a call where you and I will talk in person over the phone for just a few minutes to see if I can help improve your situation. And if I can, we're going to meet in person to discuss it further. So if you're retired, thinking of retiring soon, maybe thinking about taking a buyout at work, or you're one of those folks that just took that buyout and now you're trying to figure out who to trust with that 401k plan of yours, then why don't you do this right now? Log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. Just click on that little red button to arrange that phone call. Or hey, as usual, if the internet's not your thing, you can call the offices 24/7. That number is 877-499-9255. Well, usually we conclude the show with have a good week and all that good stuff. You know what we're going to do? I'm going to conclude the show with the theme song from the book, Tony, Baloney, and Cookie. So I hope you enjoy the theme song. Until next week, you make it a good one, and we'll see you on the Worry-Free Retirement.
Tony, Baloney, Tielico, Tony, T-legged, toe-legged, bow-legged Tony. Tony, Baloney, Tielico, Tony, T-legged, toe-legged, bow-legged Tony. Tony, Baloney, Tielico, Tony, T-legged, toe-legged, bow-legged Tony.